What's up, Carl?
How are you? It's
I'm
good to see
good,
you.
I'm good. Yeah, Samuel, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can. Just speak a little louder. It
Okay.
seems wasn't expecting all this sun to be on my face today, but
Yeah.
welcome.
Okay.
Welcome to the
Thank
museum's
you.
Daily Artist Talk.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. I spent the last hour jimmying my phone up so this thing was in position.
This is the new reality, my friend.
Yeah, for sure.
So, just to get this conversation started, I'd like to just go to the beginning of your story and give people a quick bio about you,
Okay.
which I think is important. And folks joining us, welcome. This is the Museum of Graffiti's Daily Artist Talk. And today we are going to be speaking with CEY Adams, a New York City native who emerged from the downtown graffiti movement to exhibit along fellow artists like Jean-Michel Basquiat and Keith Haring. He's appeared in the historic 1982 PBS documentary Style Wars, which tracks subway graffiti in New York. Notably, CEY Adams has served as creative director for Def Jam Records, where he co-founded the Drawing Board, the in-house visual design firm. And what's so important about this is that you created the logos and advertising campaigns for Run DMC, the Beastie Boys, LL Cool J, Public Enemy, Notorious B.I.G., Maroon 5, and Jay-Z. One thing that should be noted about you, say, in your bio is that you also lecture and teach at institutions, including the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History, MoMA, Brooklyn Museum, City of New York, Museum of City of New York, and others. And also you co-authored a really important book, Definition, the Art and Design of Hip Hop, which was a great book. And currently you are drawing inspiration from 60s pop art and, vintage sign paintings and comics. And we're going to explore that in the next hour. But I want to go to the beginning of your story with graffiti. And I've known you since I was 13. I did the math today. Tell me, how did this all happen?
Wow. Well, the first thing I want to say is thank you to everybody that's been logging on to your show. I've been watching every day, and I just want to say publicly that you're doing a great job, and I know it can't be easy, and we know everybody's sitting at home. I see Crash on the check-in, and
Hey.
We have come a long way since we were teenagers, and here we are as adults, and we're still out here doing it. And we're the elder statesmen and women of the culture, and it's our job to tell the story.
And you have an incredible story, so I want to know more about it, because when I actually met you, I think it was 1977 or 78 with Kid 56 in the CC Yard, and you were with, at that time, Vade and somebody else, but you were part of a crew called the Public Animals.
Yeah,
but you weren't from the Bronx. So tell me where you grew up.
We're all from Queens. Demo is from Queens. Vade is from Queens. I'm from Queens. Just like, Pink and Quick and, a bunch of others. We're all Queens people.
And so who was influencing you as a writer in Queens?
The one and only Jester. Jester is my only influence. He is my favorite artist of all time. And I feel so fortunate to call him a friend in 2020, because as a kid in 1974, I would see his name and I just couldn't even, think of anything else. My parents thought I was out of my mind, because all I saw was those DYE tags, and I just knew one day I was going to be doing throw-ups like that.
Yeah, I would agree with you. He was one of the biggest and best at the time. And so in terms of the writing back in those days, because, what part of you were up there in Queens, weren't you?
Jamaica. We were
Jamaica,
Jamaica.
Queens, yeah.
Yeah. And I went to Jamaica High. And so, you know, I know at some point you're going to talk about art and design, but I didn't go to art and design. I went to Jamaica High School. I was
Yeah.
connected to art and design through Lady Hart and Lady Pink.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, and obviously you and Doze and
Yeah, yeah.
you know,
It's interesting because we were so closely associated. Everybody thought you went to the school. In
yeah,
fact, you didn't.
yeah.
Um, but you know, again, you know, one of the things about all this, and this what we're going to talk about today, is this journey, right? That this culture has provided for you, and you were amongst the early uh, artists of the '80s of our group that started considering canvas paintings, and this picture from those days at Graffiti Arts Studios.
Yeah.
Um,
So
Boy,
this
it's a lot
is
of history right there between all of you.
yeah, so this was done at our gallery, Graffiti Above Ground, GPI. This was done by an artist named Wasp. And, you know, I come there in the early 80s. Crash is already there. Days is already there. You know, Zephyr showed a little bit, but, you know, Pink was already there. Um, you know, there was a whole stack. It was Ernie was already there. And I came in really just trying to learn the business of selling art, because by this time, everybody's making the transition away from subways and people are trying to take their work to the next level. Also, I should say Tracy 168 was also really instrumental in helping to develop the gallery as well.
Yeah, and one of the things here I want to point out is that at this period, as especially if you could see, you know, how graffiti is being translated in canvas, I want people to make a mental note of that, right? In terms of how early graffiti on canvas was looking at that time, because it definitely speaks to where you were going in terms of your graphic paintings, right?
Oh yeah, sure. You know, this is a piece that was done in 1981, and it was this photograph was taken by Martha Cooper, and you know, big shout out to her because she was instrumental in photographing a lot of our early work. And she would come to the gallery and she would photograph all the paintings, and you know, she would always, you know, and everybody that painted subway trains knows Martha would take a photograph just like Henry Chalfant, and they would give you a Polaroid, and you know, that was how you documented your work. I mean, I can't really speak for anybody else, but I never had a professional camera when I was a teenager, so I really depended on Martha to take those early photographs of my work.
In those days as well, you spent a lot of time in the downtown scene with Dondi and uh, well, with all those guys, Keith Haring,
Zephyr.
Futura, Zephyr. Yeah, there was a whole clique. We would all see each other downtown. What was that like for you in that time, kind of realizing that there is some kind of popularity happening amongst the graffiti writers, but also a shifting of attention to Keith and Jean-Michel?
Well, you know, the thing that they had that was a little different than what we were doing was, you know, our work was, you know, a little bit more rebellious, certainly a little bit more rough. What those guys had was, you know, their work didn't have the graffiti stigma attached to it. People were, you know, just a little bit afraid of what we were doing because we were like, you know, graffiti in its rawest form. And, you know, some of us were, you know, a little bit more unpolished. We were definitely coming at it from, you know, a street mentality. And, you know, when the galleries start picking up on our work, even on the Lower East Side, they were dealing with us when we were really young. We're talking about, you know, maybe the oldest person was 20. Wasp might have been the oldest one. He might have been 25. But, you know, everybody was in their early 20s. And if not younger, I know, you know, Pink was, you know, 17, 18. I was 18, 19. Ernie was 15. we were really young. So that's a really, delicate time in your life to buy a painting from somebody and to put a chunk of money in their hands and think that, you're going to come back the next day or a week later and they're still going to be making work. Once you get that kind of cash in your hand, it's time to party. And that's the thing about what we were doing that was so interesting. We were hanging out in clubs. We were hanging out with the musicians, artists, writers, poets. Everybody was hanging out downtown because that was, where the action was at.
Yeah, it was very bohemian.
Yeah,
It
definitely.
was, yeah, I would say that for sure. And one of the things too that again part of that interaction with those guys also kind of, I believe, help us understand how to formalize ourselves as artists. I
Right,
would say Crash was one of the early guys, close to me at the time. But there was also other organizations like Soul Artists with Ali and
right,
Noga,
right.
those kinds of things. But again, that experience at Gas really changed a lot for you because you were really finding your signature,
Oh, sure.
right?
And I always knew that my style was graphic. So I was always focused on clean letters and bold shapes. And I will say I learned a lot from watching Crash and Days, how they interacted with collectors and really just trying to conduct yourself as much as a professional as you could within that context because let's face it, we were still doing what we were doing from our perspective, and we wanted to keep the essence of that. I didn't want to become something that I was not. But I think that that was one of the great things about, Joyce Tobin and Mel Newlander that ran Graffiti Above Ground, is that they gave us a platform so we didn't have to change who we were. They handled the business, we handled the making of the
Hmm.
art, and they never tried to tell us what to do because our urban aesthetic is what we were bringing to the gallery, and that's what that was in the beginning until things started to change and
What were
cats
those changes?
Europe.
What were those changes that you saw coming?
Well, certainly people started plucking individual artists. So, Sydney Janice comes in and they take a couple of the GPI artists. Obviously, Keith had his relationship with Tony Shafrazi.
Yeah.
Um, and, Jean-Michel gets picked up by Nina Nosai. And, all of a sudden Mary Boone is on the scene and,
Yeah, but you
Bruno.
also had people like Patty Astor and Step
Right, and certainly
Nines.
Patty. But if you think about it, you can only do 12 shows a year if everybody's getting a solo show.
Yeah.
So, you got Zephyr. I think Crash had one of the early shows at Fun Gallery, Futura. You could count on one hand. Even Jean-Michel showed there. So, that's 6 artists right there, and the year half gone in addition to them selling, other works and doing commissions and things, that was really one of the only games in town. So everybody is flocking to that same location. And
That's
then
right.
later on, you had Gerb with 51X Gallery. But it was a really, early time. And it was, very much undefined in terms of who was going to go where and who was going to do what. And
Well,
I
one
just knew that for me, it was time to start looking in other places.
exactly, and that's a good segue to where you were looking because you really got into honing in your graphic design skills, your design skills, and ended up at Def Jam. And what a history you've had with them. Memorable works. I'm sure even more memorable experiences. How'd you end up at Def Jam? What was
Well, I will say that this is a good time to back up just a little bit and mention my friend Andre Harrell, who passed
Oh,
away.
Most
That
Def, my brother. If you look at the screen, that was the next picture.
wow, you're
So
on it.
please, let's
Yeah, so
give a moment to Andre because he was so important to the
yeah,
culture and to your own
Andre,
personal life.
while he wasn't directly connected to the graffiti movement. He was connected through me. And he gave me some of my first opportunities working with Heavy D and the Boys, and then later with Mary J. Blige. But the other thing that he did was he introduced me to Diddy. And, you know, Puff is a very important part of my story. But what I want to mention is that in the early 80s, before Def Jam, there was Rush Artist Management. And I used to do graphics for them. And Eric Hayes was also there. While we were independent artists, Eric really took me under his wing and he taught me a lot about graphic design because I didn't know anything at the time. And I never really get an opportunity to talk about him on a platform like this. And, you know, everybody knows Eric is out there still making great work. So I want to say thank you because he really, you know, showed me the ropes at a time when I didn't know much about, you know, how to conduct myself as a professional graphic designer.
What was he imbuing on you? What do you remember most from those conversations?
Well, the first thing that I learned was to always ask for what you want and hold your ground and not settle, because the work that we were doing ended up, you know, withstanding the test of time. And these are really important logo marks that we made. And at the time, I would have been content with whatever would have came my way. Shout out to Lenny Futura. You know, I was so happy to be working. And there were times when I didn't always understand the value of what I was doing. And Eric knew that. And he would say, no, this is, you know, $300, this is $500, this is $1,000, don't bend. And they would eventually end up giving us what we wanted. And that was sort of the first time that anybody reminded me to stand up for yourself. Because, you know, when we were coming up, you basically just had to take what you could get. We didn't have enough flexibility to demand anything.
Yeah, you're right about that. And there was a lot of us that got taken advantage of by the industry. But there were, look, the quick shift was that, you know, when you had some of us succeed, we came back and informed one another about what to expect out there. And that's one of the things we appreciated about like the network of artists that were active at that time.
Right. Well,
Like,
that
yo,
was
look
one
out.
of the things that I recognized very early on when I got a contract for my firm, Drawing Board Graphic Design, through Def Jam. And you know, I partnered with Steve Carr and we started the, you know, our design firm. The Beastie Boys were right there and they gave me a lot of my first opportunities. They hired me to design that logo, and then they took me out on the License to Ill tour. And that was where I made my first real money. And then, you know, I started designing album covers. And, you know, by this point, my firm is really doing well. But, you know, a little known fact, a lot of people don't know. I tried to pull phase two in the early days. Our good friend, Todd James, did some graphics for us for Beastie Boys and Redman and some other things. And, you know, I always tried to pull in the cats that I knew from back in the day that had skills. But, you know, it wasn't always easy because I already had a team of people that I was working with, but I knew the sensibility of what a lot of the graph artists had to offer. But this was real business. And there were moments where you sort of had to educate people as you went along because I knew that this was something much bigger than where we came from with graffiti.
Again, it's one of those things that you brought into Def Jam, and of course, designing and becoming well informed by the business by other kids who are musicians, also learning the business, right? I
Yeah,
could
for sure.
imagine.
Yeah.
I could
Yeah.
imagine that exchange with the Beasties and how much shit they dealt with.
Oh,
Um,
but it was a great time. I mean, that's the beauty of being young is that We're doing our thing. Futura, you know, you were there. We were just having fun first, making
Right.
art and really trying to make a way for ourselves, you know, and that's the most important thing is that, when you get put on, you put your people on,
Yeah.
and
And
it
you built
spread.
strong bonds with them. I mean, I've always associated you with them. I know you were close friends with them.
Yeah,
It's evident, in the Beastie Boys book, which we have at the museum at our shop. I was like, oh shit, Say's all up in here. Of
yeah,
course, because it's almost like you can't tell their story without you as a
right.
part of that journey.
Well,
And
we go back to ground zero. Their first
yeah,
record, Cookie Puss, I designed the single cover, and they're really instrumental in my story, and we're still best friends to this day. I mean, that's a shot of Adam and I at Beyond the Streets, and it was a beautiful reunion with Eric Hayes, and big shout to Roger Gassman
hmm
because he pulled in everybody. And like Eric said, this is our opportunity to come together as adults and tell our story in our own words. And that's what's so great about where we are now. It's the same thing that you're doing. Big shout to my man, Such Styles. I see you.
well, one of the things I want to explore with you too is the music business, right? The how you were negotiating that as a young independent agency, uh, creating a look and feel for a culture.
Well, I will say, luckily, I didn't have to think about all of that. But the thing that I thought was really important was I had a lane all to myself because this was a time when everybody was carving out their niche. Crash was doing his thing, Futura was doing his thing, Keith was doing his thing, Jean was doing his thing. A lot of the cats that went off to Europe started to blow up. Pink's career starts to take off, and I knew I wanted to carve out something that was uniquely mine. And I always knew I had a graphic sensibility, and designing album covers was something that really hadn't occurred to me until I started doing that early work with Eric Hayes. And I thought, this is something that I can do, and this is a lane that nobody can take away from me. And I happened to hitch my wagon to, something that was just taking off. And, Rush gave way to Def Jam, and Def Jam just took off like a rocket ship. And before long, I'm working with LL Cool J and Public Enemy and certainly Run DMC. But these are relationships that I've had my whole life. I'm still working with LL right now.
Right. And I'll just underscore that. I'll underscore that, say, by saying it's not just that you've had a long-standing relationship with these artists. You've had a long-standing relationship with the culture of hip hop.
Right, right.
And tell me about the project you're working on now with the Smithsonian.
Well, what I'm doing right now is, and I've, we were talking about this earlier. I'm doing this coffee table book called the Smithsonian Anthology of Hip Hop and Rap. And this is a 9 CD box set coffee table book that chronicles the history of hip hop, the early days of breakdancing, graffiti writing, DJ culture, and certainly MCing. And, the essays are written by, the best, authors in the business. This book has everything. Everybody that we just mentioned is included in this book. And this is a great way for people to understand our journey in our own words. So this book has Crash, Days, Pink, Lee, Futura, Dondi, Zephyr, yourself, Eric Hayes. This is going to be the book that tells the story of who we are, where we come from. Big shout to my man Can too as well. He was really instrumental in giving me some great work. Same thing with Wayne COD. I'm really just so proud of this because this is what we have been waiting for. This is 45 years in the making. And the Smithsonian is the blueprint. This is by, this is the most elite museum in the country. And for them to come to me to do this project, it is what I've been working my whole life for. And it's a really beautiful book. In addition, like I said, it's a 9 CD box set with some of the greatest hip hop of all time, dating back to 1978 up to present day. And so this is soup to nuts. You want to learn about the history of where we come from.
This has been your quarantine project?
Oh yeah, I'm working on it right now.
This is a good quarantine project.
Yeah. But it's also, this is our opportunity to tell our story in real time. And these are the people that have been on the journey since the very beginning. And to have an opportunity to not have it watered down and to get to make sure that Crazy Legs gets his due and Frosty Freeze and, like I said before, Dondi, Phase 2, Lee, Quick, Futura, everybody.
There's a lot to name, but I want to continue with you because you've done some great commercial work and collaborations, and of course with your message and your tone has always been very peaceful, very community based, and here we see this really cool project you did.
But that's all from Bambaataa. And, our early days at the Roxy, hip hop used to be about peace, love, and unity. And, like you said before, the money will come, but you have to be true to the craft. And that was the way I always thought about it. So when Adidas approaches me about doing my own signature brand, I think, okay, you know what? I'm going to celebrate the history of hip hop. This is image of my friend Adam Yauk, RIP, MCA, on the side of the shoe. And, just having an opportunity to make something in my own likeness, the way that I want for the people that I came up with that understand who we are and where we come from is what it's all about.
Right. And one of the things that you've done is design and publish the book Definition, The Art and Design of Hip Hop. Tell us a little bit about that and how long was that? I can only imagine that was a couple of years in the making, perhaps?
Yeah. But again, all of the names that I mentioned are in this book. And this is my first book, and it's published by HarperCollins. And the DEF is an homage to Def Jam. And the idea is that this is a soup to nuts book about the history of art and design in hip hop. So, it's everything from car culture, sneaker culture, graphic design, film, dance, music, everything. But again, these are all of the people that help to shape the culture. Yeah. And, we've been at this for a really long time, and it's great to have an opportunity to finally tell our story. Also, a big shout to my man, Part One, a huge pioneer in the culture that doesn't get enough credit. And this guy was doing this thing when I was sitting in my room twiddling my thumbs, and he was out there on the front lines doing it.
Uncle Part, yes, he's a legend and beloved. So again, part of this is to emphasize how aware you are of trends, of design, of creative craft, but also you have an ear towards technology as well.
Well, what? Like a long time ago, I heard your brother say, Kel, if you don't evolve, you dissolve.
Oh, I wrote that.
Well, then, tell him that, a lot of you
love Kel, but that was me. Go ahead.
You were very young, but big shout to your brother Kel first.
Yeah,
but
big time.
I heard that, and it made perfect sense. Also, a big shout out to Chino BYI. He's been instrumental in, you know, giving me a hand, getting some of these great images for the book, from a lot of these great graffiti artists. You know, the idea to me was really simple. It was, you know, I had nowhere else to go. The people that were starting to make their mark, transitioning from graffiti to, you know, the gallery scene, were off and running, and everybody sort of, you know, had taken up shop where they were going to be. And I found graphic design to be a lane that I had all to myself. Big shout out to my man Sess.
Well, the
And
graphic design was always a natural element in your work. You brought it into
yeah, but that
this,
came from, you know, letter form.
right?
When I started out as a graffiti artist, I just liked bold letters, and I just thought, well, if I'm going to do design, I just wanted to be in that style. And because it was hip hop, everything was about being bold and being in your face. And
Yeah.
so that was it. And I
Yeah,
just,
this say piece is here in Miami at the Graffiti Gardens, which Ernie headed up, and we had that great invitational for all you guys. That was a
oh
great
yeah, it was a lot
project.
of fun. Yeah, bio. Big shout out to
Big
Tats crew as
Yeah,
well.
big shout out,
And certainly Ernie, he
big time.
is one of my favorites. He literally is on my top 5 all time. You
Yeah,
know, I'm one of these guys. When I put my top 5 together, it's like the same people that I've known for, you know, like 40 some odd years. But these are the people that, you know, are still pioneers in the culture, because, you know, they just do great work consistently year after year. And, you know, when I think about it, I can't help but, you know, like, think that these are the people that everybody should be paying attention to if they're not already.
yeah. I think you may be right. I think that the new generation knows how to garner its attention as much as we did,
Right.
right? And I think this, you know, we have our lane and our platform. And, you know, that said, with somebody like Ernie or Part, we here at the museum celebrate them, support them, just like you do. And I think that is a good message for elder statesmen to be espousing on the community, and also the people who are interested in us. You know that we.
Well, you know, the thing is, there are people that get a lot of credit, and, you know, deservingly so, but there are people that are really talented that just put their head down and they go to work. That's what the
Yes.
Tats crew do. That's what Ernie does. There's just so many people I can think of. You know, Tristan Eaton is one of the, you know, the artists that I think is doing a great job at really showing people what, you know, and I say younger, I know Tristan's not a kid, but, you know, compared to, you know, the people that came along in the 70s and 80s, he's younger, but he's doing amazing work. Cycle is another one. And, you know, he's not a kid either, but, you know, and he doesn't do graffiti, but hats off to Shepard Fairey, because Shepard, to me, is Keith Haring reincarnated. He, you know, is really working to show people what is possible. And that's one of my favorite things about artists like that. And now we're sort of all at a point in our career where we don't have to run from anybody, look over our shoulder, and we can all be peers together, making great work and sharing information, which is the one thing that we didn't do so much back then.
Yeah, information was scant in the terms of how to operate yourself as a brand or business, because eventually, yeah, you became the brand, the Say Adams brand. But again, it's important for all of us who kind of traverse that fine line between being a brand, a design brand, those of us who spend time in the design world and the fine art world. You know, those lines were always kind of like very sharp, right? Like the art world didn't want you to,
Well,
as a
yeah, and
designer.
you know, also for us coming up, keeping your integrity was primary. Like, that was paramount. And, you know, where we came from, selling out was a big deal. You didn't want to be perceived as selling out your culture, because we weren't even using that term, but we were
Exactly.
talking about the neighborhood. And now here we are all these years later, and we're getting opportunities to work with a lot of these corporate brands, but a lot of them really understand the journey, and a lot of these creative directors at these big firms and the big brands understand who we are. Shout out to Levi's and Pabst Blue Ribbon, because they're two of the companies that understand who we are, and they hire the original artist that made the work important right from the start. Big shout to my man Cycle. I see you out there. Claw Money, act like you don't know nobody.
A
But
question
that's
for you,
really
because
important.
this becomes really important in terms of how sponsorship affects narrative and outcomes in the work. And one of the things that has shifted in your work over the years has been the collage work, right?
Oh,
Which is
sure.
of a great tradition. We were talking about, I think also this is also in essence a homage in a way to the great Romare Bearden, who was telling stories through torn papers and
I
color
agree.
collage.
Well, first I have to say thank you to the ultimate storyteller, Jeanette Beckman, because she took all of these photographs of me in the studio and on location, and she's been instrumental in helping me develop my career. And I think that those things are really important. Like I said, when I mentioned Henry Chalfant and Martha Cooper, um, very often those people don't get recognized. And I think now we're at a place where we can talk about them and point to their work, and their name might resonate with folks already. So that's a great thing. But Jeanette gave me an opportunity to work in her studio before I had a space of my own, and this is recently, um, in the early 2000s, and that's the photograph that you see in the background. But I was trying to develop a new style again, and really just trying to figure out where I was going, because we had gotten to a point where some of our peers had mastered the craft of the spray can, and I thought, okay, you know what, I'm gonna just move in another direction. And I saw what Greg LaMarche was doing. He was doing really interesting things with paper as well. Now, that wasn't the inspiration, but I knew that I had to find my own voice. And Bearden was somebody I was always familiar with, and I thought, well, what would it look like if I took that inspiration and really put a spin on it? And so the painting that you're showing now is Arm & Hammer, and it's the one that's hanging behind me. Um, and I wanted to go and combine my love of graphic design, my love of graffiti, and my love of branding, and combine all those things together. And this is what I came up with. And I thought, this is a great opportunity for me to tell the stories of brands that I knew as a kid growing up that I was in love with.
Right, and this was that whole trusted brand series.
Right, right. So this is our trusted brands, and again, they're brands that are popular, but they're also brands that I had a personal relationship with, because as a kid growing up, Arm & Hammer was always in my refrigerator, and like some of the others, Coke and Pepsi, and even brands like Levi's, they've just been a part of my life before I was even conscious of it.
One of the things that I found interesting when we were talking about these works was perception, right? The perception of what these works represent to you and to the public, and how are we to translate um, the meaning of these already known icons, right, that are reimagined. And one of the things I was saying to you is it's like it felt like pop art like in terms uh, of throwing it back at America, right? Throwing it back at us in a with some subliminal or some conscious messaging, right? And I was barking up the wrong tree because obviously you felt it a certain way. But I think for me, if they resonate as powerful images of our community,
Right,
of
right.
the hood, right?
Well,
The
certainly, right. Everybody's got a relationship with Kool-Aid. Whether or not they want to acknowledge it is another story. Same thing with KFC, Coke, Pepsi, um, Pabst Blue Ribbon. Like a lot of these brands, Levi's, they're all brands that people are familiar with, but I wanted to take them and put a spin on it from my perspective, but I also had this new technique that was new to me, and I wanted to see if I could do something as interesting as what Lee is doing with his work, as interesting as what Crash is doing with his work. Just take something that is familiar to people and put a contemporary spin on it and own it myself. And that was what I was trying to do with paper. I'm not trying to claim that I'm, discovering anything, but I'm definitely reinventing it.
right. What I like is your honesty about it, right? That it's very deliberate and very conscious of the viewer, and of the kitsch element in it, the playfulness, that all of a sudden these papers allow you to composite, um, sometimes, as I was mentioning before, the sense of false security that they give me, and that Americana, right? And of course, in my sense of humor, the Pan Am going down was I remember Pan Am as a kid. That was a big icon. It was a coveted brand, right?
Right.
And then went belly up.
Well, the thing is, you have to be of a certain age to remember those things. But these things stick in people's heads the same way Nike does for today's generation.
Right.
And the point that I was trying to make was, for me as a kid, these brands were my best friend. And I wanted to sort of remind people that a timeless classic will always be a timeless classic. I've known Lenny for, 45 years, and I still call him Futura 2000 because I can't get the 2000 out of my head.
But
But that's
you
what
you
it's
you
about.
mentioned you mentioned the American classic. So as we're closing out, I want to focus on the American classic, and this is some of my favorite of your works of recent. In
Right.
taking on the flag. There could be no more contentious graphic design or physical object in this country that will kind of bring debate and love to the table.
Right.
Tell me about going, towards this subject. What
Well,
was
my
what was
first instinct was I wanted it to be a contemporary homage to Jasper Johns. That's what I was thinking. And I thought, I'm going to take this and I'm going to reclaim it. And I did the first series in red, white, and blue because I wanted to make the direct connection. But then I knew the next step was going to be going all black because I wanted to show people that America is not just about, this overly patriotic, one way of thinking. It's universal people, like Africa Bambaataa said. It's all of us in this together. And I thought the only way to get people to understand that is to make a black flag, and then they will see it. So the National Museum of African American History and Culture, for the opening dedication, commissioned me to make a giant flag on the National Mall with President Obama cutting the opening, ceremony, the inaugural ribbon. And I thought, I'm going to make a black American flag because this is the biggest stage in the world right now. And I have a platform, and I want to show people that this is America. The same way Childish Gambino said, this is America. It's not one thing. We are all a part of that. And as graffiti artists, we've been saying that since the very beginning. We're here too.
Right. I mean, the colors of the flag clearly, and let's just say, in a rather obscure way, have been whitewashed, right? There's something about, I think, in the work that you've been doing up to this point, right, that, you know, although friendly and entertaining, there's something that's a heavy burden in that, in those subjects, you know?
Well, you know, I mean, I am an American through and through. I'm never going to disrespect the American flag. But that said, it's as much mine as it is anybody else's. And I'm going to always honor it, but I'm going to honor it in my likeness. So people that look like me understand that this is your America too.
Yes. No, it's a powerful subject. Again, I'm glad you have chosen it as your muse at the moment. You're producing really wonderful work with it, Say. So listen, in the last moments that we have, folks who are chiming in with us, I'm going to take some of your questions and Say, you ready for kind of a speed round here?
Sure. Let's do it.
I Carry TV asks, how's the Anthology of Hip Hop catalog coming along?
Is that a question? It's coming along every day. You know, I'm working towards it. We hope it's going to be ready holiday 2020.
Okay, folks, give us some more questions or I'll just keep quizzing him. Here we go.
Big shout to my girl, AM. I see you, Alice.
Yeah, of course, all our friends are joining us. That's a good sign. Tell two friends, everybody. So Say, let me ask you something. How are you holding up during the coronavirus? How is this affecting your, obviously you are working at home, but in terms of maybe bigger projects that were on
well, all of those things are on ice. I mean, a lot of things went away. I'm thankful to say that I am, you know, self-sustained. You know, I'm doing what I have to do. I have work, but I can work at my own pace and nobody's, you know, standing over my shoulder, you know, sort of breathing down my neck. But, you know, I'm scared. You know, I'm scared for my son. He's 35 years old. He's married. He's got a gang of kids. Yeah. I'm scared for all of my friends that are, you know, over 50 that I love. I mean, you know, man, you know, I'm worried. I don't have any answers, but when I started asking my people about, you know, whether or not art matters, like, you know, what's the point of us getting up in the morning and me riding my bike to the studio and looking over my shoulder and carrying hand sanitizer and, you know, disinfectant and all of this. I was reminded by a lot of people that not only does it matter, but I matter. And that's the thing that gets me up in the morning. You know, you called me to do this thing 2 weeks ago, and I've been thinking about it every day. And I got on to look at all the interviews that you did with all of these artists all over the world. Some of them I know, and a lot of them I didn't. But I just got to keep going because other people expect it too.
I think we all matter. Our stories matter. Legacy matters. At this moment, in terms of how we communicate, how we move forward, how we adapt to a new reality of space between people, that shouldn't mean space between a shared history and love for one another, or art for that matter, because it's as you can see from all the people that we are connected to, we're all utilizing it for healing and for helping each other and for supporting and inventing something, or a mask or a hat or a visor or something. We're all in on it. But it also underscores the reasoning for why we do these artist talks, because as a museum, our goal was to, look, let's try and, while we can, just consolidate the culture for a minute so that we can get these stories, you know. So let's get people together to share. And your journey is incredible, because there can only be one say. I mean, look at the story you went through that we've learned about you today. So that's an important thing for us to celebrate with you.
Well, I want to say big shout to my man Peter Pade. He's doing really great work out there.
Yes,
And
he
you
is.
know, Carl, I've known you a long time, man, and I don't imagine that you ever thought of yourself as being a spokesperson for the culture, but you're doing a
I'm not a
great job, man.
spokesperson.
This is not a job, but you are, because you care enough. You,
We
Alan
all
Kell,
care enough
Alice,
to say,
not everybody does the work.
well, look,
Thanks.
the thing is, this only happens because the community makes it happen, right? Because Ket and Allison had an opportunity, and because of all the writers that helped create that opportunity, right? And we're building on all of this, and this is why we
You're
get
very kind. I'm just going to say that because
no,
you've
but
been
it's true
doing the
because
homework. You've been doing the homework. You know
well,
your stuff.
I've also known a lot of you guys for a long time, so I
Right.
think personal history matters. But again, it's not my interest to be a graffiti, so to speak, scholar and expert. I know what I know, and I'm curious about what I'm curious about, and I think that's why your story was so compelling to me. Because yes, it is about graffiti, but it's about also to me how we look at ourselves as artists in this country, and those of us who are of that age of the civil rights, right? And of the 80s, right? How does that reflect in our work? I mean, we have plenty of young people coming into the culture who are style writers and graphic designers and so on. But those who can testify to the hip hop experience in New York or Chicago or Miami or Detroit, San Francisco, Boston, you name it. Everybody has their own history to build upon in the way that we were from the beginning. All this stuff that you were mentioning, right? That was all the blueprint,
Right.
and so we have to acknowledge that as we start getting to this age that we're at now with our work. Well, what does our work really mean in this day and age, in the age of Corona?
You know
And
what?
so
It
that's the
means
big
a
question
lot.
for you.
That's what I'm realizing. It means a lot, and we mean a lot to generations that are coming up now. And I'm amazed at how much a lot of these young people know about their history, the history of style writing, the history of graffiti, graphic design, hip hop. They know their stuff, and I think what they don't know is what we know. And they have to understand that we respect who we are and where we came from. And they need to see us doing this, because that's what they don't know. They don't know that we are all really connected. I can get on the phone and I can, call Lenny, or I can call Eric, or Zeph, or Revolt, or whoever it is, and we can have a powwow, and it doesn't have to be on the grams,
Yeah.
because we've been doing this.
And so as you think towards, the future, what young artists are you looking at? What young artists, male or female, are you considering heavy these days?
Well, I gotta say, when it comes to graffiti, I love what Mad C is doing, but Cantu is my guy. Like, he is just brilliant with it. And you know who else is really nasty? It's Tristan. Really, really nasty. I mean, beautiful work. But really, this is gonna sound weird. Like, I think the pioneers are doing even more interesting work. When I see what Eric is doing out on the island, like, damn,
Yeah. I
really
think
cool
there's a
stuff.
streak in us that I have to admit is somewhat born out of the hip hop culture in terms of competing with ourselves and our peers. And I think people forget that we are, in the business of ideas, and so a good idea is worth its weight in gold, isn't it? And
Yeah,
so
and I mean, like I can't even really get into what I think about your work with your head this close to me. you know.
Well,
But
this
I'm
isn't
telling you,
about me. This is about you.
no,
So,
but you asked me, and I'm telling you about you because maybe you can't see it. Like you make the work and you step to the side. But I'm telling you, man, like in the 90s, when I saw those sculptures, I was like, he cracked the code because you took something that was two-dimensional and you made it three-dimensional and you could physically see it, and it was raw and it was dangerous, just like stepping on that third rail if you weren't careful.
but
Dang.
you know what I like to emphasize, and that's why I had Michael Walsh on the other day, right? Because he's also a graffiti sculptor, and he's into manufacturing and making shit and 3D printing and technology. It is available to us, right?
Right,
Because
right,
my whole thing is, as painters, why can't we realize this art form in other mediums, in tangible goods, whether it's printed plate or even fashion went back in them days, and in jewelry design.
right,
There should be no object on left untouched.
right.
Clearly, you've been on that path, and others have been on that path as well.
Sure.
And I hope that as we continue having these open conversations about our careers and our lives as artists, that we could offer people a glimpse into the kind of ambition we had as young men,
Right.
as
And women.
professionals,
And women.
and women as well. Absolutely, no discounting that. No discounting that. And again, that to say, your journey has been of great benefit to me and to others. And what we feel when we do these talks is to celebrate you and to honor your contributions, and those around you, because they're very important people like Andre Harrell, who passed, that is a part of this bigger story of hip hop and graffiti culture.
Right,
And
right.
that said, tomorrow I'm going to close out and thank you, Say, but also just to shout out my condolences to Kes Five's family and
Yeah.
friends. He's passed, and I would also like to just say to everybody, take good care of yourselves out there. Tomorrow I'll be back. Oh no, actually tomorrow's my day off, so
That's right.
I'll be back with the one and only Dash on Wednesday. That's going to be really exciting. That's going to be a real treat. But Say, thank you once again for joining us at Museum of Graffiti, and God bless you. And I look forward to the book, and congratulations.
Thanks a lot, Carl. It's always good to talk to you, brother.
Take care.